An interview. We are recording an interview with Jackie Robarts and Marion Cameron for the Alaman Society Oral History Project. Could you please confirm that you agree to participate by stating your name and repeating the following? I consent to be interviewed for the Oral History Project and for the interview to be recorded.
My name is Jackie Robarts, and I consent to be interviewed for the Alaman Project and to have this interview recorded.
And I'm Marion Cameron, and I also agree to have the contents forwarded on for future information.
Thank you very much. So I'm just wondering maybe if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you two got into nursing and met.
Right, we'll do that. Everybody calls me Jackie, but my name really is Jacqueline Robarts, and I am a graduate of the Hamilton General Hospital School of Nursing in 1954A, and I also have my Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Toronto in 1962, followed by a Master of Education from U of T at a later date. It was my privilege to be the founding principal of the Osler School of Nursing that we're going to be talking more about today. Marion and I have been friends for 47 years. Marion is also a graduate of the Hamilton General Hospital, and she graduated in 1945A. And I first met her when she was a supervisor of the labor and delivery room at the Hamilton General, and frankly, I was scared to death of her. She was a wonderful supervisor and very efficient. Every doctor loved her because she didn't call them till the last minute for the delivery, but we also had to perform very well and very highly for Marion. Some years later, I went to the Public General Hospital in Chatham, Ontario as the Director of Nursing Service and Nursing Education. And lo and behold, who was there but Marion? And she was the night supervisor. Having just returned from 3 years as director of a hospital in Warsak, Pakistan, where they were building a dam being done by Canadians, and Marion was in charge of that hospital for the 3 years. So she came back to Canada and went back home, our home being in Thamesville, and was the night supervisor. We became very good friends. Her family were very good to me since my parents were both gone. And they sort of adopted me as their second daughter, and we have followed our careers along together for these many years. And when Marion retired, she came to Fonthill to live with me here in 1988. However, in between that, we lived together in Toronto and here and there along the way as well. Marion is now a client in the Rappeljay Lodge here in Welland, Ontario. She has a tremendous history of being one of the greatest nurses that the Hamilton General produced. And she's made many, many friends during that time because she was always very caring and looking after sort of the personal needs of her patients. Unfortunately, her own health is not as good now as it was. She has had Parkinson's now for over 10 years. She's had 5 mini strokes and 1 major stroke. And it became necessary for her to be cared for 24/7 at home, which I did for 2 years. And when she couldn't walk any longer, she ended up coming here as a patient. And I'm very happy to say that she's made real progress in the 6 months that she's been here. She's now walking with her walker. And I think the socialization has really been good for her. And she's here as a very important part of the Osler School of Nursing, dearly loved by the students and the teachers. And in all of my experience with her, I really never heard any nasty things about Marion. So she does have a little difficulty in remembering facts or communicating what she'd like to say, so we just hope you'll understand that, and I'll help along the way when necessary. So Marion and I, as I say, are sort of like sisters and have been friends now for 47 years. And I am now her power of attorney and all that kind of stuff, so helping to look after her needs And we're very privileged today to be able to tell you about this project because it was very dear to both of our hearts. And although I was the founding principal and had a lot of the basic work to do, Marion was always there as a helper, a guider, and worked very well with the staff and the students throughout the years of the school. And then when it became part of Humber College, which we'll talk about later, Marion went on to work with the staff there until she retired in 1988.
Okay, so now you're going to tell us a little bit about Oster.
The Oster School of Nursing was named after a famous Canadian doctor, Sir William Osler, who attended Trinity School in Weston in 1866. And as a result of a proposal that was put forth by the Ontario government and the Ministry of Health, the Oster School of Nursing became a reality when the Humber Memorial Hospital requested that they have a regional school of nursing in their area. So in 1965, the Oster School of Nursing Board of Governors engaged a company to build a building, and I was engaged to be the principal of this school of nursing. And I have to say it was a very exciting project to be able to start something brand new. There were no things that had gone before other than the traditions of nursing. So we had a great deal of fun creating a uniform and cap and graduation pin and all of the things that go with that. And in some ways are not the important part of the program, but they certainly had an attraction for the students who came to the school. And although we only had 7 years of operation before the government changed their mind again and decided that all of the basic nursing education would be in the community colleges, and these various schools were closed. At the time that the Oster School was founded in 1966, there were 6 regional schools in the province. The school was originally housed in a little house on Church Street in Toronto, Weston, and 5 of the original staff were still with the school when it became part of Humber College. We moved from that little house to another little bigger house, and then eventually we went into the Toronto Hospital that used to be a SAN and then became a rehab center. And we moved into the 3rd floor of that building. It's old nurses' residence from gone by days. And we were, of course, awaiting our new building. Unfortunately, one class graduated without getting into the new building, but we survived and so did they. We started with 40 students and we graduated 28 of those students 3 years later. And the program was a 2+1 program, so that they got the basic education with some clinical practice, but then they had a full year of internship before they actually graduated. In January of '68, the tenders were put forward for the building, and we ended up, as this picture here indicates to you, a 10-story residence and a 3-story education building. And it unfortunately did not open until 1970 because of a construction strike that went on for 4 months. We did adopt an all-Canadian theme, which was fun, and also we started right at the beginning. The crest of the Osler School of Nursing is the maple leaf of Canada, and the students' pins were also made in that shape. We had uniforms that had the maple leaf tartan on them, and we used the colors of the maple leaf tartan, red, green, and gold, as themes for the various colors of bands that the students wore on their caps until they got their black bands when they graduated. This, of course, was quite different than anything the other schools had had, so it just started in a different tradition, which certainly the students enjoyed, and we did too. The nurse's cap a picture of which is there, is a replica of the original tall silk hat that Sir William Osler wore when he went to school in Trinity School in Weston. That cap has 11 folds for the 10 provinces and the Northwest Territories, and being round, it signifies the circle of education from beginning until they become graduates and even after. And as graduates, they wore the black band. The first band they wore was red, which sort of said, "I got started." After they learned a bit, they got the green band, which indicated they were growing within the profession. We decided not to have the gold band, but we had a tartan band, which included all of the colors that they wore until they got their black bands when they graduated. Little things, and yet things that certainly attracted the families of the students and themselves. Of course, today they have completely disappeared because we don't wear caps anymore in the profession, but it was, and these things were all designed by members of our staff. The cap was actually designed by a teacher called Donna Meyer, who is now living in Victoria, BC.
She's going to try one thing.
The all-Canadian theme prevailed throughout the school as well. The large auditorium was called the Canadian Room. The classrooms were named after provinces. The rumpus room was called the Territories Room that the students had in the basement. The small seminar rooms were named after the smaller provinces. The tiered classrooms were named after the mountainous provinces. And the largest room was called the Canadian Room, which was tiered as well. Now, in the spring of 1972, the Ministry of Health announced for the first time that students entering schools of nursing would have to pay tuition fees and for their room and board. So this was a major change, and in my opinion was the beginning of getting closer to the nursing moving into the community college setting.
Jackie, at the regional school, they didn't have to pay for anything?
Not until 1972.
Okay.
So, and we started in 66, so there was almost a 6-year period where they didn't have to pay.
Oh.
They bought their uniforms and they had to provide their own room and board because we didn't have any place for them to live anyway for the first 3 years. But the first 2 years in residence was paid for by the government. But then the students started paying for that afterwards. And the building was a lovely building, $6 million spent on the building of it. And Mary and I can tell you every square inch of the building. We checked 1,000 times, I think, before the students finally arrived. There were 10 stories to the residence. And when we started, we had all female students. Eventually, we had some male students. We had to make some accommodations for that. On the first floor, we were a little old-fashioned about mixing them on the same floor, but eventually they got together. The school curriculum began, as I said, as a 3-year program. It was known as a 2+1. But then in 1973, it was decided that these existing schools should be a 2-year program, which sort of followed the Nightingale School of Nursing, which was kind of the project, I guess, of starting the 2-year program. And they were very successful in downtown Toronto, and it probably would have been just as well to start us out in the community colleges rather than having these regional schools. But what the government wanted to do was to use hospital facilities that did not have schools of nursing attached. But they wanted to have the influence of students learning in their areas. They also felt this would attract students to the hospital as a graduate. And so they really worked hard on that. And we worked with a number of hospitals. That we were on the grounds of the Humber Memorial Hospital, but we used the Northwestern General Hospital, the York Finch, Branson in North York, and we went to the Lakeshore Psychiatric, the Queen Street Mental Health Facility, the Crippled Children's Area, and the Toronto Hospital, was very good to us with both space and putting up with our days before we finally got into our own building. So in this way, we had many more people contributing to the education of the student. We were able to involve the directors of nursing of all of these hospitals who took a real interest in the curriculum and program, and certainly helped us to give the student an educational setting rather than a training situation. In my days, we went to class at 7 a.m. after we'd worked all night or before we went to work 12 hours in the daytime. And while we learned a lot, we certainly didn't get the kind of education that the students were getting in the regional schools and also in the community colleges and now eventually in the universities. In 1973, it was announced that the diploma schools of nursing would all go into the community college setting. And in our situation, Humber College already had a program for nursing in the college, and they were using some of the hospitals that we were also using. And Quo Vadis, which was for ladies over a certain age, seniors they call themselves, but they weren't really that old. But Margaret McKenzie was the director of that school, and she did a fine job of encouraging women 40 and over to come into the program, and many of those women did a really great job as graduates eventually. So when we all got together, we had 3 schools of nursing coming into the North Campus of Humber College. Sorry for mentioning Niagara, but I was the president of Niagara College from 1978 to 1990, and it's sort of the last place I was at. You got to also remember that this Osher School started 45 years ago, and my memory is not as good as it was then, and so I may, not give you the exact details.
It's amazing.
In just going through the yearbook, it's been interesting to note the number of times that Marion's name has been mentioned. And in this book, which was the 74 book, the yearbook was dedicated to Marion. It says, "We are all aware of Miss Cameron's contribution to Osler as a teacher, but few of us realize the time and effort she has sacrificed in the production of our yearbooks. Her guidance has been invaluable to the success of each publication, her encouragement and support a necessity when failure seemed inevitable. In appreciation, we, the graduating class of 1974, would like to dedicate this final edition of the Ulster School of Nursing to Miss Marion Cameron."
Oh, that's funny.
And it just gives you some sense of how much the students really appreciated her. Marion was, there was no fooling around with Marion. She really wanted you to be a good nurse. But she also had a very good listening ear, and she was a wonderful counselor, which many of those students needed when they came in at 18, 19, or whatever. As my friend and someone that I was living with at the time, Marion eventually came to Toronto from Chatham and was part of the Ulster School as long as we were there, and was my right hand in many, many ways. And it would just be impossible to say all that she did. But Marion, maybe you'd like to make a comment about how you felt about the Ulster School. Think you could do that?
What could I say? It was something that we just started and worked at and developed, and we came a long ways.
And during that time, Marion also went back to McGill to get her last year of her Bachelor of Nursing Science, so that she would meet that qualification as well. But, no degree gives you the kind of experience that Marion brought to the school. And I'm very pleased that she's able to share today with us, even though, it's not too easy for her to sketch all these things for us. I was very sad, I guess, when the Ulster School closed, because we really just had 7 years. We were just beginning to grow up a bit and become well known. But it's interesting that we graduated 560 students in those 7 years. And as we followed them for a while, almost every country had a representative working from the Osler School. Many of those people, of course, now are retired. Doesn't seem possible, but it is. And I sit here as an 80-year-old, and Marion is an 88-year-old, and so, you know, we're has-beens, but we still have the memories of our nursing careers and all that it meant to us. And I believe that the regional school, while it was an expensive experiment because of the cost, it was a very good beginning setting for the eventual move into the community college setting, where students now get 2 of their 4 years for their degree. And we were able to learn from the past and move forward with the kinds of things that the Nightingale School started, and also the fact that we became an educational program rather than a training program. And while there was lots of practical experience, it was different. And you know, the students didn't work 12 hours a day and go to class after or before classes. And they didn't just get a half a day a week off like we did. It was usually was Sunday, so we could go to church whether we wanted to or not. And you know, things like that, which we laugh about. But I'm sure that the people who worked so hard in the beginning years, I read of the history of Toronto General Hospital School, the Hamilton General, many of those women who dedicated their total lives to making it work and happen. Were they able to be here back in the 60s, I think would have been very pleased to see that many of the traditions carried on, but that we did move forward and we did provide an education for our students, not just a practical training. And there are some who will still say, well, you know, they didn't get the practice that they used to get, and they didn't learn to be an OR nurse and an obstetrical nurse. You know, they had to do that afterwards. But, you know, I think we did do a good job of giving them a good orientation to nursing. And hopefully we were able to help them be caring people, which in my books is more important than a lot of the other things. And as a director of nursing, as a principal of a school of nursing, and eventually as a president of a community college, I still believe that my strength was being there for the students, caring about them, helping them to grow up, helping them to care about people, and give the very best they could. And if they weren't interested in that, then I sort of suggested they go on to something else that might be of more interest to them, because it is a profession that needs caring people. And now that Marion's experiencing that kind of care in a nursing home, I realize all the more why it's so important that we have people who basically care about the human being first and look after the details well, secondly.
Marion, how did you feel about the move from Osler to Humber? Was it a sad experience, or was it difficult for you?
In a way it was a bit sad, because we gave up our accommodation at the Osler School of Nursing, you might say, and we moved into the community college with it was a different program, or different surroundings, as you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And so it did make quite a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how long were you at Humber? You were there from 1973, I guess, until 1988.
Yeah.
She retired.
Yeah. Now, Jackie, your role changed a little bit at Humber, as with the
Yes.
movement.
In 73, nursing moved into, and I became at that point the principal of the Osler, Quo-Vadis, and North Campus of Nursing. And then in 1974, somebody there suggested that I should apply for the vice president academics job. And of course, they didn't have many women in the senior administration at that time, and don't have many even now.
Can you tell me who was there before you? Was there somebody there before you? That was
No,
just the very beginning.
It was Gordon Ragg, who was the president at that
Okay.
time, decided that he should have some vice presidents. Before that, he had these principals of campus, like the Lakeshore campus, and I got the nursing campuses. And then he decided that they should have a vice president academic and a vice president administration, which tends to be what we see more in the community colleges today. Anyway, I was interviewed for the job along with a number of men, and I got the job, and I was at Humber for 4 years in that role, which was interesting. Having been in the Ulster school where everybody called you Miss Robarts, you go into the community college and students, hi Jackie, how are you? And which I really liked, but it was quite a change from the Miss Robarts bit all the time, or Miss Cameron, or whatever. And we were in my role as the vice president academic. I had responsibility for all the programs, but I still had a bit of a hand in the nursing program, and trying to assure that we maintained the standards and that we met the criteria from the Registered Nurses Association, the College of Nurses, and those kinds of things. And then I was approached to apply for the president of Niagara College, and I got that job in 1978. So the nursing got to be a little bit less in my portfolio and so forth. And I've had a really interesting career. I've enjoyed every year of it. I did retire when I was 60 because I thought it would be nice to do some of those things that I hadn't had time to do, because when I was getting my education, my parents both died just after I graduated from the basic program. I went to night school and summer school in Toronto for 5 years to get 2 years of my degree. And then I went back for one final year, during which time I worked evenings and nights back in Hamilton to pay my way. And I did the same thing when I was working on my master's degree. So it was the hard way of getting an education, but it wasn't a bad one. But it made me appreciate the importance of education. And no student could say to me, "Oh, well, I can't afford to get an education," because I proved that you could do it with a little extra work and so forth. So it's been a very good career for me, and I have touched the lives of hundreds, probably thousands of students over the years. And in this book, there's just one. The valedictorian at the 74 graduation, he's thanking various people on the board, and then he says, "Secondly, to Miss Robarts, our principal, to whom we must show tribute. She not only addressed you as a student, but also endeavored to respect you as an individual. The reflection of her character appeared in the minds and personalities of all her staff, to whom she also gave guidance. In my opinion, Miss Robarts has won as much respect as any other woman I am likely to meet. With the warmth of her friendship in mind, it is my sincere wish that others will be fortunate as I was to develop under her leadership."
Awesome.
And I felt was a real fine tribute from one of our young men who graduated from the Ulster School.
And that was the final graduation?
That was the final 74.
74, yeah.
So
And then you retired at 60.
I retired at 60, thinking I was going to do all kinds of things like travel and stuff like that. But that's when I really learned to be a nurse, because in my nursing career I was a teacher and an administrator most of the time through the years. Didn't do very much bedside nursing. But in the 20 years since I have retired, Mary and I both had a friend who lived with us who ended up with cancer and wanted to die at home. So Mary and I nursed her at home 24/7 for 3 years. And as she was sort of going out, we had another friend who was a single nurse who I met when I was a student in psychiatric nursing. And Rona had no family or relatives. And so Mary and I took on looking after her. She had Parkinson's, and she also had Alzheimer's. And while we didn't care for her at home, just for a short period until we could get her into a facility, she was for 2.5 years in nursing home in Niagara Falls, and then in nursing homes here in Welland. And Marion and I took turns every day going. I would go at noon, Marion would go at night to feed her and so forth, and be her advocate and look after those sorts of things. And after 5 or 6 years of that, as she was sort of leaving us, Marion got the Parkinson's and started on her journey of understanding what it's like to be a patient sometimes. And throughout those years, I have been putting my nursing skills back into, and I can tell you, I'm a really good bedside nurse, aren't I, Marion?
That's right, you are.
I looked after Marion 24/7 for 2 years at home, and we didn't have one pressure sore, we didn't have any breakdowns, and it only took about 4 weeks in the nursing home to have our first, pressure sore. So I really appreciated what I learned as a student, even though I didn't do a lot of bedside nursing as a graduate.